I'm Cheryl J Fish, and I'd like to thank Victor Pal and Miko Saiku for making this event possible and for finding funds for the participants. And I'd like to thank Mary Newell for her work co-editing the anthology Eco-Poetics for the More Than Human World. Most of today's readers have contributed to the 500-page collection of writing from a wide range of bioregions, nations, and life situations. Eco-praxis, I like to think. Today's readers are teachers, elders, and activists who harness the written word to offer responsibility and hope for our troubled planet. I'd first like to introduce Mary Newell, one of the editors of the Eco-Poetics for the More Than Human World anthology, and she will talk a little bit about it and another anthology that she's currently editing or co-editing, and then we will have the poets read in alphabetical order from there. Thank you all for coming, and we should have time at the end for conversation and questions with the all of you who are here. So Mary Newell has authored the chapbooks Tilt, Hover, Veer, and Resurge. She's had poems in journals and anthologies and essays, including When Poetry Rivers. She is co-editor of Poetics for the More Than Human World, an anthology of poetry and commentary, and the forthcoming Routledge Companion to Eco-Poetics. It's my pleasure to introduce Mary Newell.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Victor and associates at Helsinki University. I put the information about the anthology in the chat, so if any of you want to copy that down, how to order it. And also associated with the anthology is a series of readings that we did over the summer, which is also available now on a YouTube site. Briefly, the Poetics for the More Than Human World is an anthology of ecologically oriented poetry and commentary. As Cheryl mentioned, the contributors include 140 contemporary writers. It's all living writers with one or two exceptions that we honored recently passed poets from a wide variety of bioregions, nations, and life situations. And I think eco-poetics is still a vague term, and I hope we'll talk more about what it means. But I think for all of us here, it involves those who include the more than human world in their vision of accountability. And the poets who are gathered here to read today represent the richness and variety of this collection. What does it mean to include the more than human world in your vision? How does it affect the speaking voice, the language you choose, and all the other factors of poesis? So about the anthology, I see that one of the co-editors is also here, Bernard Quetchenbach. The anthology came into being during a time of international pandemic and social and economic upheavals, of which I'm sure you're all aware. It began as a web journal issue. I kind of volunteered rather bravely to take on one issue of a journal, not knowing that that would end up being this rather long-term project that developed from that into an online anthology and finally a book in print. And we developed this anthology with no financial sponsorship. So the book really owes its existence to the generosity and resourcefulness of those who offered their time and abilities. And so there's a great deal of gratitude toward that whole contingency and toward those who have found joy in reading. Joy and also impulses for activism, I would hope, from reading the anthology. So we decided to create a series of readings. Those were organized by Cole Swenson, and they can now be found on the YouTube site of Charles Alexander. It's the CHAX, C-H-A-X YouTube site, under the category of eco-poetics. That is in the link as well. Bernie and I, after that project, were offered to produce the Routledge Companion to Eco-Poetics. So this is a book of essays, which tries to be international, rather challengingly within the limits available for the length of the book. I hope it will become an invaluable resource as a reference book and also as a textbook for courses in literature and the environmental humanities, and that is due out at the end of 2022. So that's what I had prepared to say about the anthology, and I'd be happy to answer more questions later if it comes up in the chat. I also wanted to read a few poems before moving on to my illustrious co-readers today. This first poem has to do with the Hudson River and a train station. I live near the Hudson River, and many of the train stations near the river have bird nests, including bald eagle nests. And so this is a poem called Bank Tangle. The title refers to a phrase used by Charles Darwin to refer to the intermixture of life forms, quote, dependent upon each other in so complex a manner. And the poem mentions Indian Point, which is a nuclear facility which has now been closed, but it's in a cleanup phase. So it's kind of still there, very much a presence. Bank Tangle, train stop anomaly, twig nest tucked into branch tangle, river scan, plummet, breed. Across the Hudson, homes tucked into bank slope, survey, embark, dwell, settled in for the duration. 19 miles downstream, smoke rises at Indian Point. As the river ambles north, history's wheeze in eddies, a palimpsest laden with fuse. And my next two and last two short poems are about hummingbirds. I've gotten really interested in hummingbirds. Of the 28, of the many species of hummingbirds, 28, which is 8%, are now endangered, mostly because of their habitats being fragile in South America. And I guess a general scientific point of view is that flowers and their pollinators co-evolve, so they develop these complementarities. And in the case of the hummingbirds, it's went to the point that one of the colors of salvia, a species of salvia, which is a flower, was actually created by hummingbirds through mixing pollen from other colored salvias. So that's kind of what I address in this poem. Co-vivance. Hummingbird tangles with salvias. Generations of entwine fold into this smooth bonding. Locomotes by quiver, broadcasts by wing whir, ripple of flight wake. Figure 8 spinouts, flash iridescent green. Needs frequent sweets to sustain fast pulsing heart. Whiz zip, hover to sip with forked tongue, drawing nectar from deep-throated blooms. Salvia's trapdoor stamens rub pollen on transfixed head of sipper, who soon flits with gold corona to blend pollen from mauve and blue salvias, forging the new ultraviolet tone. And this final poem, you could say, is sort of my petition to the hummingbird spirit. Intervolve. O voltaic garden flit, your volant frivels smile me. Your circumvolutions, phosphorescence on gyrating windlasses, fructuous volery, O profligate pollen disperser, emit a hint how not to clutch so hard it shreds tendons, rips heart house. Infuse your joy in volatility, deep intake, lunge into spacious. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Cheryl Fish. Cheryl is an environmental justice scholar, poet, and fiction writer. Her new book of poem and paragraphs, The Sauna is Full of Maids, celebrates Finnish sauna culture, travel, and friendships. She has published essays on resistance to extractivism and Sápmi, focused on the work of Sami filmmakers and photographers. Fish has been a writer in residence at Kulttuuri I Kuopila in Ii, Finland, and was Fulbright professor at the University of Tampere. Her collection of poetry, Crater and Tower, addresses trauma, ecology, and aftermaths at Mount St. Helens volcano and the World Trade Center since 9/11, 2001. She is professor of English at BMCC, City University of New York, and docent lecturer in the Department of Cultures at the University of Helsinki. Cheryl.
So thank you for that. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge is the author of 14 books of poetry, most recently a treatise on stars and Hello the Roses, which has been translated into Swedish by Hanna. She received the Bolligen Prize in 2021 and was shortlisted for the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize. She has collaborated with artists in visual arts, theater, music, and dance, and she lives in northern New Mexico. Mei-mei?
Thank you, Cheryl. And it's really an honor to read with you all. I'm going to begin my reading with a line from the poet and artist Etel Adnan, who died on Monday. I leave the horizon, deal with my terror. I'm reading to you from New Mexico on ancestral Pueblo land. We've had a long drought here for more than 20 years, and my husband and I started to go to a cabin in the state of Maine on the water. So this poem is called Singing. It's in 4 parts. It's about dolphins. I wrote this book, a treatise on stars, as trying to make one ecosystem out of the sky and the earth. All day I feel the approach of dolphins. Their thoughts are in my mind. When I swim, my cells attune to them, because oceans full of vibrations that transmit to water in my body. It's a repository of primordial data from space. All creatures in water can access the Akasha. Tones entering my cells transform into feeling, an awareness of 2 worlds at once. I send back my thought, picture, feeling, and together we form new vibrations of knowledge that had been dormant in me. They're here. I swim out of the cove toward them, so happy I hum, and their answering chorus reverberates across water. We know each other. One dolphin is still, far below me. Her form takes shape as she rises silently in bright blue, motionless, sunlit. Thank you for showing yourself, fulfilling a deep longing within my deep memory. I empty my mind and listen for her reply, which comes as waves of emotion. A cloud surrounds me. I expand into its stillness and receive tones conveying information very fast. They teach me to hum, to whistle and sing. Sound amplifies my body across open water. Even their joyous play has this sensation of creating space. And when they sleep, stars augment their frequencies. We converse in mind cell helixes of image and feeling. Cosmic legacy, cosmic extension imprint holographically on my heart neurons as dolphin empathy. There are sounds which can stop time, alter surroundings, or shift your dimension. Swimming, I lose my sense of place, even physicality, and connect with collective love. They teach me to join my aura with the cosmos by spiraling with me in sound star tetrahedrons, and to love those with whom we merge. Then being is healing through innocence when the animal becomes the teacher. Once a dolphin swims toward me, I open telepathically and respond. I practice this method of reflection to contact life forms in other space who are trying however they can to meet us. Sirius radiates high frequencies to lighten the dark, denser planets. Dolphins travel to and from such a planet through diagrams like songs on ocean floors. They wish us to participate in overlighting the collectivity of souls in our galaxy and ally with them to access the space sister brotherhood. Through these planetary vortices, dolphins catalyze starlight to refresh water on Earth. Transference between species is both cellular and holographic or geometric. For example, my friend's body is 3D in front and 4D in the back. She exists across dimensions while appearing so ordinary in her yellow shirt and blue slacks as we walk to the shore. Memory is vibratory like DNA, condensed light. She volunteers. You and I relate through our mutual past on Sirius in Glastonbury, Santa Fe, so I repeat their joyous staccato syllables. I listen to podcasts of no singers and tune to high pitches the Pleiades used for propulsion into our atmosphere, using the star codes of dolphins. We've attributes in realities we're not aware of. Dolphins reside in these dimensions like dreams in oceans. They swim within magnetic streams of other entities, angels we've invented, others heavens, cyclic destiny. I glimpse one jump from its energy band, attracted by my friend's intense aura. He shows me Earth's sister planet replicated by sound as we co-created by singing, sitting in her yard, gazing at the ocean under pine trees. There are messages and clouds in wavelets on granite, cicada and meadowlark calls. Space travelers materialize morphogenetically from local beauty and merge with us They enable travel between time and stars by projecting tones just ahead of the consciousness of the person migrating. The way dolphins pass me so fast, I don't see the bubbles until they're far out of sight. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Joseph Bruchac is an enrolled member of the Nulhagen Abenaki Nation, author of over 170 books in several genres. His poems, essays, and stories have appeared in hundreds of anthologies and magazines, ranging from Aquas Sasne Notes and Parabola to the Paris Review and the National Geographic. His books of poetry include Four Directions, New and Recollected Poems. It's my pleasure to introduce Joseph Bruchac.
Kwai ni tombak. Hello, my friends. Louisa Soza, my name is Joseph, or the Peaceful One. Alnobania takiak, a human being is what I am, as are all of you. And I greet you this morning to tell you we are all part of one great circle. In fact, let me share with you the oldest song and this first breath, that of the wind, sifting through leaves, taught first to trees, then to the winged ones who passed it on to those of us so late to come to this symphony that may go on after we have gone. That song was taught me 45 years ago by a Santo Domingo Pueblo elder, Swift Eagle, a song for the morning and for the first touch of the sun. If we listen long enough, will we hear what the birds are telling us? Our old people did. They knew those songs that greet the day star every morning are messages we need to understand. They tell us we are not alone. Bright life is all around. If we open our ears, our hands, our hearts, we may begin again. The line. The line is thin between death and life. Beech leaves remind me as they swirl in November wind, alive as brown butterflies. The stance of theirs is no final one, only one more turn on a journey that all of us share with them. This morning, as I stand to walk, I carry the lesson of those leaves, guiding me toward whatever dance this autumn day may bring. The trail. I have followed the trail that winds back on itself, ever climbing, ever descending, like the uncoiling fern that opens as a hand does, to grasp something new, to let go of a secret. A way like deers, a path like cougars, twin threads stitching up and down through life, through death, all the same. Paton Bagak is our name for Lake Champlain, the waters in between, and this particular poem was written while I was walking on snowshoes, as the poem tells you, across that great lake. Walking over ice to Valcourt Island. Paton Bagak, the waters between is breathing underneath the skin of white, no thicker than the space from one frost to the next. The rumble of an army bomber throbs overhead, practicing war. It passes as quickly as all human sounds, while the lake's thrum continues. I walk on bare paws, splayed like the feathered feet of grouse, following the hieroglyphic prints of deer and coyote in new snow. I walk, and as I walk, I listen to the drumbeat that began far away, growing closer, closer, the horizon underneath my feet, widening into sky as a crack opens, moving toward me like a strike of lightning caught in slow motion, spreading the ice between my feet, and one last heartbeat before I fall in, closing that gap again. The ice subsides as I stand still on the chest of this great being, ignoring my passage, simply waiting for a stronger sun to open its lungs. As I wait for strength to return to my limbs, Paton Balk rumbles and hums beneath me, a song older than human certainty, deeper than all our memories, stronger than our brief presence on earth and waters. Waters are life. In fact, the word Mei-mei Berssenbrugge means water is life. It's the motto of a project that took place on the Pine Ridge Reservation over a decade ago that I was honored to view and to learn about, where water was brought to a community that had no drinking water. And it was brought from the great Missouri River. And now, of course, still, the Missouri River is imperiled by oil pipelines. As my friends at Standing Rock know, I was at Standing Rock and visiting their schools and was honored to be part of a little project to raise some of the money to support the water protectors. And so this poem was written for that. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. Why do some not understand? It is water that gives us life, not that black blood sucked from soil. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. Why do they ask such a small thing they say, to run their metal vein filled with poison across Missouri, whose giving waters, after a century of thirst, have arrived as a medicine for Pine Ridge, where wells filled with alkali were bitter, causing sickness, the only water brought in by tanker trucks across unpaved reservation roads. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. It is safe, they tell us. Nothing bad will happen. Engineers promise, as memories mean to them as little as words written on paper treaties, while the blackened shores of Alaska still choke on the gift of the Exxon Valdez. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. Of all the gifts great mystery gives us, only water exists in every form, solid, liquid, gas, breath, blood, and tears, feeding the roots of sweetgrass and sage, corn, wheat, and every tree, nourishing all growing and green. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. So the people gather to protect the river. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, the churning waters. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. They come from every nation, for every being that walks or flies, that swims or crawls, all our relations. The water that flows joins all the colors of the four sacred directions, yellow, black, white, red alike. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. So we stand with Standing Rock, stand without fear, as Sitting Bull stood, buffalo facing into the storm. Stand for children and grandchildren, for 7 generations to come, for all that breathe, all who weep and bleed, all that has been, all that will come. Stand humbly, facing toward the dawn that always follows every night. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. Mei-mei Berssenbrugge, water is life. Mitakuye, O Yasin, all my relations. I'd like to read one more if I have time. And this particular poem is called City of Dreams, and it's in the English and the Abenaki language both. I'll read the words first in English and then the Abenaki. And it is dedicated to what we call New York City. City of Dreams. Stone on stone, sun panak sanak. We see you, Manhattan, Knaupna, Manhattan. Not just as you are now, Onda, Taului, Alam Tawan, Nikombi, but as you were, Kawagi, Alamitanob, as you always will be, Tolawi, Aska Mawal Tonji, in our lodges of memory, Wigonal, Gagan Wahondit, Mikwadam held between rivers, Gagana, Nanasawiwi, Sipoyok, and the deep breath of ocean, Ta Nagwiwi, Sogbon Nasa. You remain the place of many meetings, Hia Asqui, Dalitoni, Aikiki, Misakaki, Wanakawongokana. Words sung in many tongues, Klowosakanal, Nilton, Wasawonkanakanakanak. The mother of dreams, Digwa Sawonkanal, Wigawe Sa. You were never sold. Asma, Kitaon home as you. You cannot be bought. Onda Kikisi Manahong. Thank you for listening to me, my friends. Olioni Nitobak.
Thank you so much. That was so powerful. So I'm going to read now, and I actually have a poem that's also about New York City, but I'm not going to start with that. So I ended up writing this new book of poems, The Sauna is Full of Maids, inspired by my many trips to Finland. That started when I was a Fulbright professor. So I'm really lucky and thank everyone that enabled me to have access into the Sami and Sapmi community. So some of the references in these poems are inspired by that. I'm going to share my screen and start with 3 poems from the new book, The Sauna is Full of Maids. This poem actually is set in Sweden at the Ice Hotel. So this is the book is photographs and poems. I was really lucky that the publisher Shanti Arts would do photographs as well as poems. So I'm grateful for that. The Ice Hotel at Jukkasjärvi, Sweden. Sun glares off our sunglasses, April above the Arctic Circle. Sophie, Nico, and I set out to visit the Ice Hotel, giant rectangular igloos where tourists sleep in furs, dreaming with white candles and mirrors. They charge high fees to enter the Ice Hotel. We won't pay to survey beds with reindeer pelts, fantastic bird memories in glass. Down the road, the Sami Cafe in a Lavu tent. Its central fire warms us as we seek the sky through the top of its folds. Ice sharp yet fragile. This town was a Sami marketplace. Now murals of Sami depicted in colorful gaktis with Lutheran missionaries in the small red church dating from 1607. I hear stones breathe. Not far away, the colossal Kiruna iron ore mine bores deeper, operating 24 hours a day. The town is sinking. Citizens, monuments, homes must be moved or demolished. From cracks and crevices, the sound of cash. Iron and ice, time's refraction, waters rise. Sophie and Nico hold my arms, guide me from step to street. Without any boots, I'm a sliding stone. She's a Sami filmmaker excavating the past as ongoing. Every time a child climbed in the playground, a mine hulked, poisoning the sky. Ore always matters more. He's a miner like her father. What shape? Love's glint. Nations circle the water on alert to take more. Ice and glaciers melt with ease into the Barents Sea. Unsuspecting believers. Pilgrims crossed the second curved bridge. Liars crossed the line so often they fell bridges. A van drove into turbulent seas filled with unsuspecting believers. Can you experience pure goodness, envying others as you do, living with the senseless demagogue who orders more bridges when there's no longer a river? Origin and motion. In the Kalevala, a barren water mother's knee is the place where birds lay eggs. The bottom half of a smashed egg becomes earth. In Sami myth, the sun goddess is the mother of humankind. My mother, a widow, grows old in a hot place. She wants to stay put while I alight in foreign lands. The sound of a yodel emerges from one's chest and throat. The Sami yoiks a longing in the heart. My mother's voice cuts through the woods like earth in dark rye bread. Motion molds us into elements beyond our drives. My mother worries in syllables she cannot sing. Pain arrives in her feet like eggs hatched. Next, I want to read from my earlier book, Crater and Tower, that juxtaposes the events of 9/11, 2001, with the volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. I was at Mount St. Helens in 2010, 30 years after the eruption, and the trauma of seeing what had happened there at Mount St. Helens, not only the stack blown off the volcano, but the destruction of the old growth rainforests and the devastation just visible even 30 years later led to me feeling my PTSD from 9/11, and I was able to write these poems that juxtaposed those two incidents. So some of the poems are about 9/11 out Mount St. Helens, and some are about one or the other. This is a poem about New York, to go with Joseph's Flexible Bark. After evacuation, after afternoon, where are we? Who are they? Some could not run, some fell from buildings, some made it to boats. The wrong one said, go home. Do images disappear? Who recalls landfill from before the towers? Sand dunes where artists like Laurie Anderson performed. Who builds buildings and who demolishes them? Who are the artful and who lack vision? Who desires revenge? Who follows orders? The Lenape built dwellings of flexible bark on this island before it bore the weight of iron and steel. Smoke escaped from cooking fires in their dome roofs covered with bark. Who thinks of them? Oh, spirits within the realm, protect us. Where do we think we plan to run? Ownership. Burlington Northern Railroad once owned the crater of Mount St. Helens volcano. In 1982, the chairman and CEO wrote to President Reagan, "We are pleased to advise you of our intention to donate our ownership in the crater and the land adjoining Spirit Lake. Part of the checkerboard of public and private, there's still land trading, mining, cutting, collapsing, beauty, but it's not cheap. We plant more than we cut," said the foreman. The new tower, named Freedom, belongs to developers. In exchange for the right to shop, pay taxes, go to war, and remain flagrant targets. Where shall they keep remains? Spirits can't rest. We build more than we plant, said the foreman. The first surges rushed down the volcano's northern flank at 80 miles per hour. Smith Creek, Pine Creek, Muddy River, the South Fork of the Tuttle River, mud lahars, buried cars, mailboxes, farms, and roads, destroyed 16 bridges, 1,100 miles of state roads. Old growth Douglas fir, western red cedar, western hemlock, and noble fir ascended 2,000 feet above the lake, eradicated quickly. They found bones a few blocks from the Twin Towers, more than 10 years after the attack, between the cracks as they demolished old scaffolding. For multi-million-dollar condos, they excavated a skull, a tibia, what might have been a jaw. Whose brother or mother? Concern floats for a millisecond, whispers between lovers, despair. Where is the sunlight going to go? You mourn, we own, said the developer. And I'll close with a new poem that's that's based a little bit on, influenced by the prose Edda of Norse mythology. So I can't get away from these mythologies. First Kalevala, Sami, and now Norse. Start over. If they made stones and gravel from teeth and molars and bones, and sea from gushing blood, and sky from a skull, might that explain pain and sorrow when sea, sky, and earth become decimated again? No matter what we believe or who we descend from, sun and moon, clans and forests, giants and dwarfs, like eyelashes, go gentle upon all elements. Whisper, do not shout. Do you not understand you're treading across your brother's mouth, destroying your sister's arms with your toys, clogging the atmosphere, all elements choke? For freedom, make amends. Throw your brain in the air, return what you pillaged, boils from across a willow mother's belly, the size of stones. Start over, start small. Thank you. Our next reader is Juan Galeano. He's a poet, essayist, and filmmaker born in the Amazon region of Colombia. He has over a decade of fieldwork on symbolic narratives of riverine and forest people in the Amazon basin. And he has a collection of folk storytelling, folk tales of the Amazon, translated into several languages, the documentary film, The Trees Have a Mother, Films for Humanities and Sciences, and most recently last summer, El Rio. His poetry is inspired by Amazonian cosmologies and the modern world, and they've been anthologized and published in international journals. It's my pleasure to introduce Juan Galeano.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I feel very honored to be here in the company of great poets and the audience. My first poem is from my book Yakumama and Other Mythical Beings, and it's about an Amazonian forest guardian, perhaps the most known in the entire Amazon region. So this is a poem. The name of the forest guardian is Curupira. Curupira. With one foot pointing ahead and the other pointing behind, the Curupira walks through the jungle and tends to the animals, braiding the young palm trees' hair. Hunters swap the Curupira cigars for his secrets. The Curupira puffs the cigars. Animals, trees, and fruits appear in the paths of his smoke. But the men shouldn't make off with all the animals, trees, and fruits. The Curupira could blow smoke so the animals, trees, and fruits disappear. Blow all his smoke and make the paths vanish. He could also tell the animals his secrets for hunting men. And now I'm gonna read some excerpts from my book, A Special Report on the Wind, which is a book, it's a cosmology of the wind. So I'm going to start now. Winds tell their stories in the way that suits them best. Work and more work is what makes the wind so restless. Excessive criticism causes the wind to sleep with one eye open. Like so many things in the world, people would like to enslave the wind. The wind screams, heads, butts, and punches as if he had snakes in his belly. With no food or water, the wind doesn't know how long he can hold out. If a wind is not happy, no one else can be. A wind who started as a friend kissing the earth now attacks her like an animal. Broken arms of trees and upside down houses are the worst masterpieces of the wind. If the wind can do what he did in that town, he must have more powers than God. The winds that worked for the Maccabees, flattening cities, will return the day we least expected. It is hard to stop a wind mistreated in childhood from becoming a hurricane. The wind would like a new life in the company of people he chooses for himself. To calm himself, the wind sips a drink at a table in an outside cafe. When a wind wakes us up, we must ask, what's wrong? If he comes to knock on our door, he could be feeling sad. He could have a sick child or want to tell us something. The wind would do anything to go back to the places he came from. The only bad thing is that the earth will cry like a child whose milk is being taken away. Yesterday, a ferocious beast against people and houses. Today, entertained by little flowers in the garden. To show us he is not an animal, the wind plays the flute in a very special way. Without teeth or claws, the wind is without doubt a beast of a totally different nature. And a couple more poems from my book, Amazonia. Actually, 2 poems. Clouds. My father came to live in the Amazon to teach the Indians how to make puzzles from clouds. To help him, every afternoon, my brother and I ran after the idle clouds passing by up there. The clouds appear and disappear like thoughts. Near our house, many Indians lined up to piece together puzzles from the clouds that they know best. Here, some clouds look like trees. Others remind people of pirarucu fish. Elsewhere, the Indians are looking for a cloud to complete the head of an armadillo. With water from the rivers and with city games, my father writes to his friends, our Indians are entertained and learn to think. My brother and I would rather the clouds turn into meringue so we can eat them with milk at supper time. Girl. A girl who bathes in a river ends up falling in love with the river. Her parents would like her to wed an automobile. Better find her another husband. Get her away from that river. This affair with the river could make others in the universe uncomfortable, some say. The wind and other famous personalities are upset. They go on the radio and are seen on television. The son who comes to greet the girl every morning with a crate of many roots is upset. The cloud who tried to slip through her window to take her far away is furious. But the girl disappears. Nobody knows to where, in the arms of the river. My last poem is Plantains. What else can two plantain trees do beside the river? Everything ends, everything is over, except our love. With our bunches hanging and with the whisper and touch of rain at night. The foolish tomatoes will change color if they saw us together in the broad daylight. With the breeze and our bodies, without bills or telephones, without searching for each other all over the world. Just plantains content with the sun and rain that any family needs to grow. Plantains eternal until they tell us we have to live for somewhere else. In the meantime, touches and whispers beside the river with some clouds, our good friends, and some trees as witnesses. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Our final reader for today is Hanna Guttorm. She's widely interested in life and its possibilities for our planet. She's especially inspired by indigenous ontologies, post theories, and nomadic autoethnographic writing, with which she investigates, in the context especially of Sami society and her own roots, how we could do and write research to make change towards a more ecological, social, and cultural sustainability and solidarity. Currently, she works as senior researcher in Indigenous Studies at University of Helsinki, and is also affiliated to HELSIS, Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Studies. It's my pleasure to introduce Hanna Guttorm.
Thank you. Kiihtu puoreähket pohkaite. Good evening, everybody. I could also add that in addition to those, I also work as associate professor in the Sami University of Applied Sciences in Kuoptakeino, Kautokeino, Norwegian side of Sapmi. And my poems, so actually I used to call them also as movements towards a poem. They come from a research project where I have been revitalizing the connection with the earth. And like as a Sami who has been born in southern Finland and also spent the youth and childhood outside of the Sami landscape, Sami homeland area. And so I have been trying to bring poetry or creative writing into research writing. So I share now some poems from the project of revitalizing the connection with the earth. Pierre Erki, the older brother of my father, my 88-year-old uncle, has been by my side, sharing stories and hospitality. Piera took me to the cloudberry bog, Luopmanjäkki. It may have been the very last time he went picking cloudberries. Actually, it was. It was already hard for him with his aching knees, but he wanted to go and wanted to take me with him. He told stories about his younger brother filling the buckets quickly. We took time to rest and time to move and pick. Not every cloudberry is ripe enough to pick. There is often one ready to pick and many which aren't yet. In this way, there's enough for everybody. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, maybe still next week for someone to pick them. I'm only taking what I get. While stepping from tussock to tussock, joking, is your bucket already full? Oh yes, that's running over already. I see. I also left a big portion for the bear over there. Some of my cousins living next to those areas have not gone to cloudberry box in more than 20 years. And another one about an old Sami reindeer herder. Petteri, an old Sami reindeer herder, told and memorized softly and longingly about the old reindeer herding times in the 50s, promised me that I can tell his stories as heard from around, but not with his name. I named him after my brother Petteri, as he is my brother in community. I heard how Petteri and others were skiing after the reindeer, how there were no fences, but only skis. Reindeer must be herded all the time so that they don't stray into other reindeer herding areas. How the fells were full of lichen. Unfortunately, we didn't have instruments to document it. The whiteness of the fells, how white they really were. The height of the lichen, how high they really grew. Unfortunately, we didn't have any instruments to document it. And how reindeers were eating lichen, and how demanding and discriminating the reindeers were with the lichen. Also in the winter, they dug through the snow, everyone from themselves, even though there would have been lichen duck by someone else on the snow, it did not meet the requirements of an eatable lichen for any reindeer. And nowadays the reindeer eat every black, small and dry piece on the surface of the snow. And if you needed to feed a reindeer, you were not allowed to touch the lichen with your hand. No, no, it didn't work at all. The reindeer would only turn their noses up. You had to wear gloves or not to touch at all. And the meat. In the old days, reindeer had fat, and the meat was delicious and mellow. Now the only organic meat is the calf in its first autumn. But still, he continued, I don't want to criticize the current practices. There are challenges enough. Old memories. One old fisherman, he had been following the river all his life, going every morning down to the river, to see the salmon, to see the possibilities for fishing, asking, tricking today, to observe the young salmon, baby salmon, swimming and playing on the shore. But he told, for many years I have not seen any fingerlings. When pushing the boat out as a child, I remember the water around the boat being black with fingerlings. The predators and saboteurs are many: seals, mergansers, sea trout. They can all have their insides full of fingerlings and young salmon. In Finland, it's forbidden to kill a seal, even though it's actually lost from its natural habitat, lost and like caged in the river, emptying the waters of salmon, and if not eating them, frightening them. Then we have to call the people at the Norwegian side so they can kill it. Humans are not destroying the salmon, but the autumn flood is. Salmon are spawning on the shoal, and if the water is high, then the flood freezes up and the spawn is in the ice too and dies. And the tourists destroy. They fish just there where salmon are spawning, at the heads of the rapids. The salmon don't spawn at all then. The fact is that the salmon look for a place to spawn already when swimming upstream. Then they return downstream, even 20 kilometers. And when they see the fishing lines and paddle boats, they don't stay there at all. Also, the fish study destroys. In the old days, when there were no research done, there were fish. And then I have one poem where there are two different concepts for landscapes. The first concept is tuovtakat, Sami concepts. Tuovtakat means landscapes which are close and very near to you, and you know them personally very well. And then there are actually, for the same landscape, you can also use the word kuovlut if those landscapes are not close and near and known to you. So in this poem, I use these both. They are not tuovtakat to me, but the home kuovlut of my father. I love them. I long for them to tell that, no, through personal and inherited experience. To know tiehtit is not enough. How could you leave them, Father? These fells, these landscapes, these hills and paths, these sceneries by the river. And why didn't I take time to come here as a young adult? I couldn't help staying with my friends and life. I hadn't come to experience belonging to these lands, not to this language either. And fishing, hunting, those I didn't learn at all. I would also like to read this in Sami. Tah ei läät munie tuovtakat, mutta ähtsän roktokuovlut. Rähkistän tait, vaillehan tait toutat, tiehtiville torvai. Mo sähtet tait kuottit, tait tuottari, tait oittosi. tait väärit ja palkait, tait oikkosit ettoi. Ja maninin nuora räävesolmosin ollen teihke. In maltan kuottit, ustipiittan ja iällinän. In lään sattat toutat kullevasvuota, tait eätnamiina niitä, in koittan killiin. Ja kuolastit piivtit taninoita olleke. And then I have one more poem about becoming an earthling. An earth, the earth, this our planet. This planet with water and ground, land in different structures, colors, shapes. This land constructed and changed by us humans. This land covered with different materials. This land covered with and under these buildings, these roads, these corridors, those all, still staying, still always there standing, no, moving, circling in the Milky Way, this Earth, this third planet from the sun. It's not Europe, America, Africa, Asia. It's not South and North, South and Arctic, and it is. We name it so. We name this covering of the earth with our socio-culturally constructed names, which are so true, which became so true, which divide lands, divide us and those from each other with the naming. They became so true that we almost think, so true that we almost forget that this is a one earth, our moving star, our breathing star, with which we breathe, with which we move and become. We say that the sun arises, but no, we rotate and we move around the sun all the time. This is not divided in itself. Slowing down the way we think, slowing down the answers that we have, slowing down the need to know, searching for words, searching for sustainable words. We still have this beautiful land. We still have these clean rivers and lakes, these green forests, especially here in Sápmi and in Suomi, Finland, land. We are all responsible in saving those. What if we were earth-centered with our human and more than human others? What if we cared for the earth and breathed through and with the earth, and loved the earth and our more than human others, as well as our more than humanist human others, more than we do. Thank you.
What a great ending to this reading, Hannah. And it was wonderful to hear different indigenous languages today, as well as other languages. That was really great. While I have the crowd here, I think I wanted to talk about this new journal, Ecoscene Cappadocia Journal of Environmental Humanities. I've just been named the story editor or co-editor, so we're looking for creative work. So I just joined, I don't know a lot about it, but we're looking for intersectional creative work with scholarly work, as well as creative nonfiction, poetry, fiction. So you could read about the journal to learn more. I just felt like this was a great crowd to announce this new role for me as trying to bring in more of the creative work into this Journal of Environmental Humanities.